I think getting with Andy Lee was definitely a good move. Had they had more time together, perhaps Parker would have developed into that really good fighter we saw glimpses of as he came up through the ranks. The fast hands, boxing seemed to come quite naturally to him. He threw in the quick uppercut, he moved around the ring okay, there was a snaking jab. We thought, wow, here's a heavyweight who seems to be in shape and doesn't seem too bad. But perhaps no matter how much time Andy Lee had had with the Kiwi, they couldn't have done anything to stop the Juggernaut Joe Joyce, who I think showed his skills in this fight. And this is the point that has been underemphasized. Everyone, of course, is going on about his chin and that pressure, of course, which Parker himself spoke about. But he actually applied distance control pressure, something Usyk does. Yeah, right, there's a parallel between Joe Joyce and Usyk. Guys who seem like the chalk and cheese. But when you start to look at a bit of the amateur pedigree of Joe Joyce, that's when you start to realise that it might not be in nice wrapping, but you've got all these solid connections. You've actually got a pretty good boxing brain. He is quite cautious by nature. He's chipping away with the jab. He's thinking about it before he makes his roughhousing inroads. And when you stay just at that kind of range where you're almost in punching range but not quite, yeah, it starts to drain you. A little bit of what Usyk did to Bellew. Parker's having to think, what am I doing? He's like, hang on, I'm the one who's supposed to be walking you onto jabs, but you're out of range. So every now and again, I'm going to throw a frustrated right hand. You're going to see it coming. Look at how Joyce is always ready to just jump back a little bit. When you noted so much for your chin, when you talk kind of slow in interviews, you just marry that to this idea that this guy isn't skillful. But when you look at the mechanics of what he's doing, it's cautious, it's clever, it's effective. Now, did Joyce-Parker come in too heavy? Most people are saying yes, but we are all retrospective experts, aren't we? It's very easy to look back in the aftermath of something, especially when you've lost by stoppage, and say, well, you should have done this, shouldn't you? To try and give Andy Lee and the whole camp credit, Joyce-Parker said nothing went wrong in camp. They were probably trying to offset the fact that they knew they were outweighed, so they didn't want it to be by too much. Because if you come in lighter and you're trying to do the outboxing game, he would have had to up his work rate, and they may have felt that that would have drained him in a different way. So by being heavier, having a bit more mustard on your right hand might buy you a bit more time. That is the rationale with coming in heavier. Problem was, Parker didn't actually land that many shots. The very good right hand he landed in the fourth, I thought that landed on the point of the chin. Now, I'm not saying it would have done anything had it landed perfectly. It landed kind of on the eye socket. Joyce eats it up. And then there was a very good uppercut, I think, in the ninth. Again, no problem. On the point of Joyce's weight, what was he? 271 pounds. That doesn't sound good at all on the scales. That says I am totally out of shape, even if you are 6'6". But no, look at him. He's trim. He's literally trim on the scales. That suggests that those stories about bone density are likely true. Just very solidly built, naturally heavy. That jab that just flicks out, he doesn't seem to really get his shoulder behind it. It's still doing damage. And I think this is why people are doing these comparisons with Big George Foreman. Now, I'll say I don't always like these comparisons. I think people like to make connections to get excited, regardless of how accurate they are. There are some similarities there. He's methodical and plodding, incredible physical strength, suffocates you, cuts off the ring. He isn't quite the offensive demon Foreman was. Certainly the young Foreman, who of course used to have these really wide sweeping uppercuts and hooks. each punch moving your head into the next as he just straight up destroyed you. Joyce slowly batters you, maybe a bit more similar to the old Big George. Joyce does a lot of things well. The more you see of him, the more that starts to come to the surface. And another one of those things you saw against Parker was shot selection. We saw uppercuts going in when he sensed the Kiwi was weakening. The body shots went in. And then he started throwing these wide arcing shots when Parker tried to drift out a distance. He wasn't letting him off the hook, and he had the ability to transition from the different ranges, throwing in the mid-range shots and then back to that horrible chipping away jab. It's all pretty good. The more you look at it, the more you get past the fact there's not a lot of flash, you just see all that substance. All of a sudden, it seems like there's only two guys who might have the beating of Joyce, which is, of course, the Gypsy King and Alexander Usyk. Now, it is the Ukrainian with the WBO belt who Joyce will be in line to fight. They fought before in the amateurs about 10 years ago, was it? Without the headgear. And Usyk did pretty good to outpoint him. But I think even when I go back and watch that, Usyk is having to work hard to outpoint him because Joyce puts pressure on you in a way that Anthony Joshua does not. I'm not even necessarily saying Joyce is better than Joshua. He certainly doesn't have the resume of AJ, but he is not worried at all about putting it on you. He is a very willful fighter who, of course, has not lost. It seems like his chin is so hard to crack. He is just going to push you. Against the ropes, he's going to throw lots of different shots to try and get the job done. If Usyk were to take the fight, he's getting on a few little niggling injuries. That could be very tough when it gets from rounds 10 to 12. Fury, it seems, is either going to fight AJ December 3rd or Emmanuel Char, someone else, so he's probably out of it. Joyce could fight somebody else, they say the proverbial keep warm, but being 37, he doesn't look it, does he? He looks no older than 30, but being 37, he has to get a move on. Frank Warren knows this. The title shot has to be fast-tracked. We have to see what Usyk is up to. And as for Joseph Parker, I know a lot of people have said he's been guilty of being boring on more than one occasion. I would agree. Paint dry Parker. That's what some people say. Had he have had Andy Lee earlier in his career, perhaps he may have had more success. But at some point we've got to say, look, he's still not old now, is he, at 30? Your stamina, your mentality, something is awry here. His build, perhaps, wasn't ideal. Kind of short-armed, awkwardly positioned in that middle ground. He's 6'4". He's not quite big enough to be one of the giant jabbers, and he's too tall to be one of the come-forward guys. And you've seen the same confusion in many Parker fights. He doesn't know what he wants to be. He's doing the flicking jab. Then he's trying to come forward and get close and do body shots. Then he's falling asleep. Then he's struggling to clinch. Then he wants a break. I think these are just inherent flaws that would have always stopped him from getting to the very top. As a big Parker fan who watched him, really got stuck into his career out 2014, 15, 16, saw him beat Andy Ruiz for the title, which, yes, he did deserve to win. It has been very frustrating, but you have to be realistic as well. As much as I admire Andy Lee as a voice of reason, both in the corner and as a pundit, I kind of disagreed with something he was saying in the build-up to Joyce-Parker. He was championing his man on the basis of being a great all-rounder. Parker doesn't really have any weaknesses, he does many things well, but in this case, I think actually ticking all the boxes at kind of a 6 or a 7 out of 10 has been his detriment. When you look at fellow countryman David Tua, who had an incredible chin and incredible power, I think he was a more potent force, a more capable force in what I thought was a more competitive heavyweight era. We know he got easily dealt with against Lennox Lewis, but one, that was Lennox Lewis, and two, Tua had already started to balloon in weight. Regardless of questions of native greatness, Parker, who said he's going back to Samoa to see his granddad, these great little stories you hear to remind us that these guys are human, and we're glad that he's well and okay after a bad stoppage. I'm hoping that so many of those people who said he's boring checked out that incredible courage he showed, the way he tried to find a way when there wasn't one, and who got up and was ready to continue when he had nothing left. His father is named Dempsey Parker, after the great Jack Dempsey, who of course said, a champion is someone who gets up when he can't.